Did you just get your laser and don't know where to start? Whether you got a CO2, a fiber laser, or a diode laser, there are some crucial steps that you must know before you begin. Today I'll walk you through 5 essential tips that are really important to get you up and running. My name is Mia from MiMo Design, and this is Laser with MiMo Design. Make sure you hit the notification bell, also like this video and subscribe to my channel if you want to see more future tutorials. But let's dive in. The first step is of course to install your laser properly. Follow the instructions that were given from your manufacturer, but depending on type of laser you have, there are a few critical things that you must check before you start running it. If you got a CO2 laser, you would have to check that your mirrors are aligned. If they are not aligned, your laser will not cut properly. To test this, you place a piece of tape on the mirror and you fire a pulse or the laser beam and make sure that the beam is hitting the center of the mirror. If it's hitting the center, it is aligned. If not, you need to align your mirrors. Secondly, you need to ensure that your water flow to your laser tube is properly set up and flowing. A water chiller is recommendable for CO2 lasers, so it can chill down the temperature of the water that is going through the system to prevent it from overheating. Make sure that your air assist is working and that you have great ventilation for your machine to prevent fumes and smoke when you cut and engrave. For diode lasers, you don't have any mirrors, but you still want to make sure that you have great ventilation to get rid of the fumes, especially if you have an open frame model which doesn't come with a built-in ventilation system. You could build or buy an enclosure to it or add an air purifier to your diode laser. If you're working indoors, make sure that your laser is set up near a window so you can vent out all the fumes and smoke. Before you start playing around with material, you need to ensure that your laser is in focus. Some lasers will use a focus gauge. You get some from the manufacturer or you can build in your own. Most lasers will have a focus distance described in the instructions or manuals, but they can sometimes be just a little bit off. So you could do a RAM test if you have a CO2 laser to find the correct focus distance. Some lasers have autofocus, which is the easiest, then you can skip all the other steps. And some lasers operate with a dot system where you have either 1 or 2 dots. If you have 2 dots, you will lower or raise your laser until these 2 dots turns into 1. So it is a little different depending on the type of laser you have, where you adjust your focus height or focal height. But you do want to make sure that you have the right distance, because otherwise your laser might have troubles cutting through materials and your engravings might get blurry when you are engraving. Later on you will probably hear some pro tips about defocusing your focal height just a little when you are engraving. That way it will make darker engravings, and also if you are scoring, you can make your scored line wider by defocusing your laser a bit. But these tips are something that I do recommend that you wait with until you have the accurate focus points. Once your laser is focused and aligned, it's time to do some test cuts. I do recommend that you always test the materials that you are going to either cut or engrave, or both, because there will be a huge difference depending on the material type and also the thickness. You will probably be able to find some basic or start settings from your manufacturer, and these settings are great as a starting point. But you do want to get your own laser to know, because not one laser will engrave or cut the same. So you have to find your own golden settings. To do that, you make some tests. This is an example of an engrave test that I did on bamboo. For the engrave tests, you can see how dark your engravings will be depending on the speed and power you use, and you can use these to find out what color you want your end result to be. For cutting, I have this little acrylic example. It still has some tape on it, sorry. I couldn't find the wooden one. But for the cut tests, you will have something similar to this, which has some round dots that will either cut through or doesn't cut through. You will pick the settings where you will be able to cut at the highest possible speed, but still with the least amount of power. That way you can make your cut process even more efficient. I personally recently did get a new laser, and I was doing some cut tests, as you might see. Some of these squares and stars did come out, but not all of them did. Some of them almost came out, and if I squeeze, I can poke this out, but you want to aim for something where it will pop out by itself without you having to poke and add pressure to it. And once you find some settings that you think you are satisfied about, you can go ahead and do some test cuts. In my scenario, I still have to adjust my settings more because this actually didn't go through. Also, I don't know if you can see it, but it didn't cut straight. The reason that it didn't cut straight and it's slightly curved is because my focus point or focal height was off. Make sure you find the correct focal height or focus distance, and make sure that you dial in your settings perfectly. Some material are easier to cut through than other types of material. Also, there's a huge difference in how each material will engrave. If you take softwood as example, I have a test here that I did. You can actually use these sugar skull tests as well. But this one is pine. Pine can engrave unevenly because of the grain in pine. So you can experience that you'll have these kind of waves going through your material. Plywood does engrave more evenly, but when you are cutting it, you might risk that there are these small glue pockets within the plywood sheet. Plywood is built or glued together in layers, and sometimes the glue doesn't fill the entire layer. So you can experience glue pockets, which can cause some charred spots or spots that doesn't cut all the way through. If you want to engrave finished products like this little cutting board, this is also a good reason why you should always do some engrave settings. These settings around here is actually what I use to engrave my plywood with, but since this is acacia, it doesn't engrave the same because this wood is a little harder than my plywood is. Another great example that I did is the bamboo board which I engraved the grid test on the back of, because here you can see how my color in the engraving and also the depth, I don't know if you can see it, but the depth will also be different depending how much power and speeds you use to engrave. Now, this is a really important step. Always make sure that you take the safety seriously around lasers. Never leave your laser unattended while it's engraving or cutting, because it might burst into fire and you want to stay next to it. Make sure you always have a fire extinguisher next to your laser in case it should burst into flames. You don't want to burn your house down. Also, take your own safety seriously. If you have a laser which are enclosed already and has a safety glass on it, that's okay. Make sure that you don't open the lid and that the lid is always closed. You don't want to look directly into the beam of your laser. If you have an open frame diode laser or a fiber laser as example, make sure that you always use the safety goggles. And yes, you will look stupid, but that's just how it is. Your own safety should always come first, and lasers are not toys. They are actually a serious, dangerous business if you don't use it correctly. Also, make sure that you maintain your laser. So clean the lens if you use a CO2 laser, also diode laser for that matter. And the mirrors should be clean, the honeycomb beds should be clean, everything should be clean. So do some regular maintenance of your laser. Check the plugs, check the cords, check that everything is as it is supposed to be. If you don't clean your laser, you will experience that it will lose efficiency and you might even damage it over time. If you don't clean your honeycomb beds, you will experience that you will have these flashback marks on the back when you're cutting. So always maintain your laser, and really, guys, keep your safety first. Once you have everything under control that I just mentioned, it's time to start creating. And this is the fun part of it. You can either start by downloading some free digital SVG files around different places. You could also buy some. I'm a files designer myself. If you want to support my Etsy shop, I would really appreciate it. I try to make all my projects as beginner friendly as I even can. I'm always here to support and help you out if you need anything. My shop is dropped in the link below in case you want to snoop around. But you want to find some digital files that you can start practicing with, especially if you want to maybe build a business later on. But to be able to cut and use all these designs, you also have to become familiar with the software that you need to run your laser. Some lasers, if you have Glowforge or Xtool or LaserPicker, I don't know if there's any else, sorry, but these have their own software, where some lasers, including my own, I have CO2 and diode lasers, and I use Lightburn. So in case you want to master Lightburn, I also have a lot of tutorials on how to design and set up your designs in Lightburn. I have a few on LaserPicker as well in the LaserPicker Design Studio. If you have a fiber laser, XCAD is usually the software that you use for a fiber laser. You could use Lightburn as well. But there's a ton of different vector software which you can use for your laser. A couple of free ones in case you just want to customize or add in a name. I can highly recommend Inkscape. It's totally free. I'll also drop the link below on where to download that, because then you can add in a name and you can save as an SVG and you can upload it to whatever software you use for your machine. But there are a lot of basic things that you need to learn on your own. You could watch some YouTube tutorials, but you need to learn these basic things to be able to make your projects. Later on, if you become skilled in your software, you could start designing your own files, which is really fun in my opinion, but it's also a time-consuming process until you are confident in the software that you are using. So start with using other people's files, either free or bought. It's totally up to you. And once you find a sense in how everything is working, you could always use those basic skills and develop them even further. But learning the basics now will save you from a lot of frustration later on. But that's about it. I do have a few bonus tips for you, so keep watching. But I just wanted to start off by saying thank you for watching. If you like this video, please give it a like, subscribe to my channel, yada yada. And also, if you have any questions or you want me to go more in depth with some of these subjects that I just discussed or anything else, please drop a comment below, because I do like to help out especially beginners that are new and hoping to make a business someday or just want to explore the world of lasers, but also the more advanced and experienced makers who want to learn how to design in Lightburn, as example. So I always appreciate inputs and also requests for future videos to make that you actually want to see. But as a few extra tips, because I know that this might have been a mouthful for some of you who just got a laser. When I got my first laser, which was a CO2, 80 watt CO2, similar to the Omtech, mine is a Viva machine, a Chinese brand, and it didn't cost much, but I didn't have any support to go to at all, so I basically had to learn everything from scratch. Some of the people I learned a lot from was the LaserGuys. They actually made a full instructions book on how to align mirrors and do ramp tests and everything else, and I will drop that link below. Also, when you have material, it can have a tendency to warp, which means that it will not lay flat in your laser. So I use these Honeycomb pins, which I cut from my scrap wood. I will drop the link for these pins down below as well, so you can grab these for free. Also, once you have found all your settings, make sure to write them down. Keep a notebook with all your settings, because one day you might get a new machine, and in case you either forget the settings on the first machine or you decide to sell it, then having the settings written down for the buyer or for your own use is definitely a good idea. So with that said, thank you so much for watching. I really look forward to helping you again, seeing you again, and talking to you again. If you need any more assistance, I also run a Facebook community called Laser Up with MiMo Design, and I'd love to see you there. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you soon.